everyone, and not so very merry Steeler Christmas. That was pretty miserable and pretty similar to what we've seen the last two games, to say the least. Sure seems to me that the Steelers start really slow, and then they got their way back into it and fight and battle it out, and against these three teams, get blown out early, then they hang around, make it interesting, never come close to getting control of the game, but then the middle portions of the game they're okay, and make it competitive and give you a little hope, and then they get blown out at the end by all three of these great teams in the second half, and it's pretty telling. I mean, you're not a great team if that's what's happening. So disheartening to say the least. Pull back the curtain. The final whistle just sounded. I've got a house full of people and a ton of good food that I am excited to go see and eat. So I'm going to knock this out. I got a bunch of stuff. Tomorrow's will be more in-depth as usual. But not a lot of great stuff. Not a lot of tons of insights that you didn't see yourself, was my hunch. I mean, they lost to the better team as they have for the last 3 weeks. As we always do, let's start with the halftime stats, the final stats, observations from the stats, all that good stuff. The Chiefs led 13-7 at the half. Mahomes was 14 of 18 for 143 and 2 touchdowns at that point. Wilson was 10 for 15 for 105. No touchdowns and a pick, which was big. Warren looked great. He was 8 for 61. Najee didn't. 7 for 21 on the ground. Pickens, 3 for 50. Clearly made a difference in a good way. I mean, having him out there. Muth, 4 for 39. Also had a good game. We'll talk about those skill guys in a minute. Again, the Steelers had 1 yard of offense in the first 11 minutes. Ended with a 181 at the half, where Kansas City was 175. First downs, Steelers had 12 compared to 9 for Kansas City. They had run 35 plays compared to 28 for Kansas City. Both teams were 3 of 7 on third downs. That was going to change in the second half, though. Kansas City was converted their only fourth down attempt. The Steelers had not had one by then. But yards per play was telling. 6.2 to 5.2 for Pittsburgh. Rushing yards. 97 for the Steelers. That was definitely a bright spot. 32 for Kansas City at the half. And almost all of it, I think 25 of it was on their first drive. Then they didn't run the ball at all. Steelers only had 1 penalty for 10 yards. Kansas City had 3 for 30. Steelers had 1 turnover, KC had 0. But Steelers had the ball for just over 17 minutes, where Kansas City was at 12:57. 2 Kansas City sacks, none for the Steelers. That was obviously a theme of this as well. And my couple notes, going into the half were super slow start again for the Steelers, but now running the ball and starting to control the clock. Again, they give you some optimism. Game easily could have gotten away from them, but didn't. They weren't in great shape going in the half, but the game hadn't gotten away from them. And at that point, the right tackle, Jawan Taylor, not getting much help against Watt, and he was holding his own more than fine against Watt. I wonder what his injury situation is, to be honest with you, TJ's. And then my last note was, Steelers are definitely going to need a turnover or 2 in the second half at this pace. I mean, this isn't going to cut it, but there was some semblance at that point at halftime of optimism. Not amongst the final stats, though. Mahomes, 29 of 38 for 320, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and really didn't look stressed. Wilson was 23 for 37, did look stressed, for 205, no touchdowns, and a pick. Harris ended up with 13 for 74, but that is really misleading. He probably had 40 yards of run against prevent defenses, the lightest boxes you could ever have on that final drive. Where Warren, on the other hand, caught 5 balls for 41 and had 11 for 71 on the ground. It was really good. It was really, really good in this game. Kelsey just kind of took over as the game went on, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but one of the reasons he's good, but he ended up with 8 for 84 and a touchdown. I did like the Freiermuth stuff, 7 for 60. Pickens made much more of an impact than 5 for 41. Worthy has come into his own, 8 for 79 and a touchdown. First downs, Steelers had 23 against 20 for KC. Third downs, 8 for 16. They got the third down again 16 times. That's too many. Kansas City was only 3 of 10. That was a bright spot. Kansas City's been great on third downs. They weren't necessarily on this one, but they only had to snap the ball 10 times on third down. Fourth down, the Steelers are 0 for 1. That's a turnover. Kansas City's 1 for 1. Steelers ran 73 plays compared to only 58. But they were out-yardaged, 364 to 389. And as you can imagine, yards per play favored Kansas City greatly. 6-7 versus 5-0, which kind of tells the whole story right there in a nutshell. 6-7 versus 5-0. Rushing yards, Steelers 202. They did run the ball really well in this game. I mean, again, some of that was, there's probably 40 yards of garbage in there, but okay. Kansas City only had 69, but they didn't really even try after that first series. Red zone, again, 1 of 4, as opposed to 4 of 5 for Kansas City. Penalties, that actually favored the Steelers. 4 for 25, 9 for 90 for Kansas City. Steelers lost the turnover battle, 2-0, and missed a fourth down attempt. So basically, that's a -3 day in the turnover world. And this is maddening. Again, I'll tell you about it, of course. But the ball came out really quick. But still, 0 sacks against those tackles versus 5 for Kansas City. Come on. I mean, that to me is excruciating. Steelers did hold the ball longer, 31-22 as opposed to 28-38. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, again, some observations. First off, I always love to commend the opponent when they beat you bad, and this is a really good football team trying to win the third Super Bowl in a row for the first time in NFL history, and I thought they were a really buttoned-up unit. I mean, other than the penalties, did Casey really make any mistakes on a very short week on the road? Really buttoned-up unit on both sides of the ball. You're missing your best defensive player. You should have tackle issues. No. But the Steelers sure made their mistakes. This is starting to become more and more prevalent against these good teams. And basically, we're outclassed for a third straight game. I don't think that's harsh to say at all. I'm sure some of you are saying things even harsher. I'm sure of it. I've already heard some of it. Now, again, they were fortunate to withstand early terribleness. Another very slow start for the Steelers, which needs to be examined. I mean, why all the slow starts? I mean, what's going on during your prep week, your week of prep, and both sides of the ball? I mean, I can kind of get it. I can definitely get it. 3 games in 11 days and all that. Sure, that's hard. This is as hard a stretch as you'll ever see in the NFL. Please don't forget that these 3 games, as good as these teams are playing, but still, they're under the same circumstances. They're on the road, and again, they clung for hope. And then the Freiermuth fumble, I think, extinguished all flame, all hope at that point. And hope was running short already to begin with at that point. So I'm not just blaming Freiermuth for the loss. I mean, he's far from the biggest problem. And did you ever feel like the Steelers were in this game? Yeah, there was a stretch there maybe, but never were in control. And I never would have live bet the Steelers to win this thing. I mean, no chance. Now, here's a key. I mentioned that Kansas City ran the ball well in the first drive and then didn't have to bother. But their quick-hitting passing game, Mahomes' mind and release and quick decisions and accuracy and hitting guys in strides really makes up for their poor tackles. I mean, I'm really excited to see what his average time to throw is. I'm sure it was low, although there were times that he had a very high time to throw on plays where he extended, which he's awesome at. He's really hard to sack. Wilson, by the way, is very easy to sack. That worries me to no end. But again, it seemed like just a lot of the same over and over. Why can't you stop this quick game? Because the Steelers don't have the corners to challenge. With Porter out, this has been something I've told you guys 100 times the last couple of weeks. They have no man corners. So you can't come up and press these guys. The speed of Worthy and Brown and the one-on-one abilities of Kelsey and Hopkins. They don't have the corners to play press man. So you end up just dealing with zones, and Mahone picks it apart, and you can only vary things up so much, and picks you apart. And I mentioned going into this game, I think Kansas City's receivers are the best they've been in a long time, really since the Rashee Rice injury. Brown's really settling in. Worthy seems to be getting better. They're peaking as a group. They have a good identity. And back to the man-to-man thing, the Chiefs were facing the highest percentage of man defense going into this game, because that's the way you can at least challenge them. The Steelers don't have the corners to do it, especially with Porter out. Just can't do it. It's just too easy pickings, and it really showed up for Kelsey. Got open at will as the game went on. All alone in the end zone, early in the fourth quarter. Some terrible communication, especially in the red zone for the Steeler defense. If you're playing that much zone, you have to be on top of that stuff with communication. Congrats to Kelsey, though. 1,000 career receptions. He set that mark in this game, and most touchdowns in Chiefs history. That's pretty amazing. But he just ate up the Steelers zone to me. The Chiefs and Andy Reid also, I thought, were great with their pre-snap movement that created a lot of the communication problems and breakdowns. Again, Reid is great at these things, but the breakdowns and softness of the zone was sort of amateur hour for the Steelers D. That's being exposed rapidly here. Please don't forget that I told you, going into the Eagles game, the Steelers had faced the easiest slate of offenses in the league. And before that Eagles game was kicked off, they were scheduled to face the hardest slate going forward. Well, that couldn't have been more obvious. From the second that Eagles game was kicked off, before that and after. There's a very stark line of delineation for the Steeler defense's story of 2024. Kansas City didn't even need a running game. Their quick-hitting passing game was an extension of the run game. As for the sacks the Steelers took on the other side of the ball here, Steelers' protection wasn't great, of course. But you're facing a heavy blitz team with a great coordinator. I bet their blitz percentage was high. I don't know off the top of my head. But Wilson just holding the ball and not feeling the rush and not being able to maneuver to see, to extend, really worries me. In the pocket. I'm talking about in the pocket. Because his scrambles were great in this game. More and more scrambles, that's a weapon. He's being really smart about that stuff. But the sacks and the pocket stuff is bad. And this was tied to Chiefs' season high in sacks without one of the best defensive players on the planet, Chris Jones. Brutal. Again, some positives I thought were some of the skill guys. Warren, Muth, Pickens, Austin. I think the arrow's basically all pointing up on those guys, and you can see that they're basically difference makers. Muth did fumble. I get that. Just to reiterate, yes, the Steelers ran the ball well, especially when you factor in what Wilson and Warren did. Najee, to me, looks not even close to being as good as Warren. Not even close. But they did have a lot of garbage time rushing yardage. But I did think the Steeler run game is a positive overall. Kansas City has not scored 29 points all year, but they got to 29. Okay. I wonder what's going on with Cam. He missed a series with that after his injury, and then he came back in. There's a long week. My hunch is he'll be fine, but who knows? And it's basically all I got. 3 games that are all pretty similar. Get blown out early, hang around, then get blown out by 3 great teams in the second half when the cream comes to the top type of situation. And not pretty. Some demoralizing end of games here, especially in Philly in this one. So there you have it. Still, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, all of you. I'm going to hang this phone up with you and go eat and hang with the fam. And then late tonight, I'll start looking into all kinds of good stuff for deeper dives for tomorrow. And that is a wrap. All right. See you.